Renato Allen Weisselberg is clearly not going to testify in this trial. He refused to cooperate in his own trial and tell on Donald Trump, and he's back now at Rikers, I guess. So is this junior bookkeeper the next best thing on the chain of custody of the signatures on these checks as they go back and forth, FedEx to the White House?
That's right. And she may actually be better because she's cooperative. She's not trying to, help Donald Trump in the course of her testimony. She's not trying to throw any bombs. She's just telling it like it is. And really, as you just said a moment ago, Andrea, this is really about those false statements in business records. And also, I think, subtly trying to show that Donald Trump cared deeply about this matter even after he became president of the United States. I mean, it is remarkable that the president of the United States was focused on getting checks over as hush money payments to Stormy Daniels during that period. And I think what they're trying to show is that you should believe Michael Cohen when he tells you that Donald Trump was actually personally involved both in these payments and in the cover-up in the books and records of the Trump Organization.
So, Renato, if I can, let me tie these two witnesses we've had so far today together, if I can, Stormy Daniels and now the bookkeeper. Do jurors have to believe that Donald Trump had sex with Stormy Daniels as long as they believe that, for whatever reason, doesn't matter the reason, that he tried to cook the books to cover it up, that essentially that he wanted to make it look like a legitimate campaign expense? And how far, then, are we from establishing that?
Great question. No, the jury doesn't actually have to believe it happened. If Donald Trump wanted to cover up this story, wanted this story to be kept from the public, it's really irrelevant whether or not there was actually a particular act that took place in a hotel room at a particular time. And that's why really Trump has actually hurt his own legal team here. A smart lawyer would have just stipulated to this and said, look, we'll stipulate that this occurred. We don't need to hear from Stormy Daniels. This is a case about falsification of business records. Instead, they're getting into this fight with Stormy Daniels, trying to attack her. I think it's going to get some sympathy from the jury. And I think the real question, and what we're still going to see here, is the evidence that Trump was aware of the false statements in business records.
But I want to back up because I want to make sure that the folks watching and all of us get that. Stipulate means he would have had to say, yes, what she's going to testify to did indeed happen.
That's right. And Donald Trump appears to be incapable of doing that. He also appears to be incapable of permitting his lawyers to show some restraint with a witness, a woman who's, I would say, could be very sympathetic to a lot of jurors. And so instead, they are fighting the underlying truth of this, which really is a sideshow for the purposes of the charges in this case. And they're attacking this witness today in very brutal fashion. And I think that ultimately is going to end up hurting Donald Trump's case.
Chuck Rosenberg, let me ask you that question as to how close the prosecutors are to getting to the heart of the matter and proving the alleged, the bookkeeping transaction, the fraudulent bookkeeping, the cover-up, if you will. That is the central charge of the case, the felony, not just the hush money payment, which is not a crime.
That's right, Andrea. So, and by the way, it's always good to go after Renato because all I have to do is agree with him. I have the easiest job on television. Renato's completely right. And by the way, the closer you get to the paper, right, with witnesses who handled it, who mailed it, who received it, who deposited it, who processed it, the closer you get to the central allegations of this case. Whether or not Mr. Trump had sex with Stormy Daniels in a hotel room is largely irrelevant. Catherine Christian put it well earlier today. The case really comes down to her role, Stormy Daniels' role. It really just comes down to one sentence. Was she paid money to remain quiet about an affair that she had with Mr. Trump? And obviously paid just before the 2016 presidential election. It would be wonderful if Mr. Weisselberg were available and truthful and cooperative. Apparently, none of those things are true. The government would have to be very careful about immunizing someone like him, and probably thinks that they have other ways to prove the documents at issue in this case. The assistant bookkeeper, Rebecca Minaccio, is one such way. This is what they need to prove. Stormy Daniels was important for some context and little else. And again, I agree completely with Renato. I thought the cross-examination of Stormy Daniels was a long walk through dry sand. If anything, it only enabled her to tell her story over and over and over, and may have made her more sympathetic to the jury.
But Chuck, I know it's hard to imagine how these jurors are responding. We're not seeing them, and those of us not in the courtroom are not seeing the reactions. But how attentive to bookkeeping and these kinds of very dry, this dry testimony from a witness who was a junior bookkeeper sending checks through FedEx to the White House, how hard is it to establish the importance of that to the jurors who've now been galvanized, presumably, by the drama of a Stormy Daniels? Is that a big distraction from the heart of the case?
Look, jurors, I think, are very good at compartmentalizing and paying attention when they need to. And it's not always easy. Right after lunch, you can get a little sleepy if you're in the jury box. But at the end of the day, 12 people are paying attention. 12 people will have all of the evidence when they deliberate. 12 people will have the advantage of listening to closing argument. And so you'll have the collective judgment of 12 people. Is every part of a trial riveting? On television, yes. In the movies, of course. In real life, not so much. But jurors still pay attention. They'll have the documents, they'll have the benefit of the arguments, and they'll make a collective judgment based on the evidence, even that evidence, Andrea, that came in the less exciting moments of the trial.
I think we can all probably stipulate to the fact that it's much easier to get a juror to pay attention to a Stormy Daniels than it is to a bookkeeper. I don't think they're going to keep this bookkeeper on the stand for 7 hours and 17 minutes, however, so maybe their patience will not run out. But I think we want to show you something that we've not seen before, and that is an actual photograph of Stormy Daniels today. This is her lawyer, Clark Brewster, who put this on social media and wrote this. Stormy Daniels was on the stand in New York versus Trump criminal trial for a day and a half, ending at 12:30 p.m. today. Couldn't be prouder of my client. How are they doing, do you think, Chuck, though, of weaving this story? Or do you not have to? Do you know that you're going to go back to it eventually, as long as you put the elements in place? Even if jurors aren't necessarily following every detail of it, you can get them there because you've laid the groundwork.
That's right. And so, and you have a bunch of prosecutors with you right now. I think I would all tell you, you tell your story chronologically, you tell it methodically, you tell it linearly. You don't have complete control because sometimes a witness that you hope to call next is unavailable. And so you have to, sort of reassemble the pieces. But at the end of the day, your proof goes in the way I just described, methodically, linearly, and chronologically. And jurors follow along. And again, to the extent that you may have lost one or two at a dry moment, you get to summarize your case and argument as a prosecutor. And oh, by the way, as a prosecutor, you also get to go at the very end of the trial. You get to do a rebuttal argument, too. And so if you think you've lost a juror along the way, or you think they may have missed an important piece that came in during a less exciting moment, you can refocus their attention. Jurors are extremely good at this. You have the collective judgment of 12 people, and they will get to it.